Keegan Hipgrave, thanks for joining me, man.
Thanks for having me, brother. I'm pumped to be here.
Bit of a cold call a few months ago, and now we're here.
Mate, it was an interesting one because I was like, because you referred to me by my name on the phone, and I was like, who is this? I was like, you obviously explained the podcast and everything, and mate, to be honest, I love what you're doing. I think it's really cool. I love what you're doing in the mental health space. I've seen all your clips out on social media with like the homeless, and obviously I love cooking steak. We had a beautiful steak just before, so man, thanks for having me. I'm really pumped to be here.
Of course, man. I've been a big fan of yours as well. A hidden fan for a few months before I started calling, and I think I said before I was in a fuck it mood when I called you, and I'm like, what's the worst that can happen? And now we're sitting here. So
and you were sitting here when you made the call, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Exactly. Mate, you've your stories resonated with me a lot, and that's why I thought I'd reach out and get you on. You said 2 years ago, I'm not sure where 2022 will take me, but I'm excited to see what the next chapter holds.
Yeah, that was my retirement post from professional rugby league, and it was an interesting space, man, because like when I was playing footy, playing professional footy, like I always knew that it wasn't going to be forever, and I'm sure we'll touch on it. Like medically retired from rugby league, got like forced out of the game when I was like 24. You know, I was such a kid, like I was so young, and so I didn't know what like life was going to look like. I sort of kind of had an understanding that I wanted to help people. I mean, that was kind of in the like general area, like mental health. Like I like the idea of like taking the stigmas out of these conversations. So there was like a little theme that I really enjoyed. But to be honest, like employment wise, I had no idea what I was going to do. So
Is that scary?
Hey,
was that scary at the time?
Yeah, for sure. Like naturally, it's going to be scary. And so I put that Instagram post out almost as like a little thing to see like if anyone like would offer me a job. to be honest, like I was like halfway through my MBA at the time, Masters in Business Administration. I was doing that with a guy called Ryan James, who was our captain at the Gold Coast Titans for a number of years. Like legend. Like he was the guy who I looked up to when I was in high school. We went to the same high school. Captain of the Gold Coast Titans for many years, like really incredible dude, like Indigenous background, like so great around community, like idol. And then we went through to do our like MBA together. So that was really fun as well. But yeah, that social media post, it was just like, man, just trying to figure out like what I want to do.
I remember you saying you tried a few things.
I tried to hit what when I was playing?
No, afterwards.
Afterwards, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think I tried a heap of things. When I first finished up, when you're medically retired, you get your contract paid out. It's a really great thing that the RLPA has brought in as part of like their negotiating like bargaining agreement with the NRL. So if you get medically retired due to injury, you get your contract paid out. So I was super fortunate that I had a year left on my contract. Like I had 2022 left on my contract. So I was fortunate. I had 12 months to not coast because that's not the type of person I am, but like financially, I know I had a year safety net. So I was like, well, what do I want to do? So I applied for the Fireys. I thought that was a really cool thing to do. I started working in disability for Whatability, which is a company that I absolutely adore. So I tried like all these like different things. And especially when I was playing, I tried a heap of things because I think knowing what you don't want to do is like just as important as knowing what you want to do. I've said that before. But I think that was a huge piece for me. So when I finished up and I got cut short and I was like, this is you've got to figure out life now. Because I'd done so much when I was playing footy, like in the real world, like dipping my toe in like different occupations. I was like, okay, well, I know everything I don't want to do. So, but what are the things that I really love? Like what lights me up? So it's like mental health. It's like psychology. It's like all these little things that I'm currently doing now. And so, yeah, tried a bunch of things. It probably wasn't until like a year and a half ago, bit over a year and a half ago, where I was just like, what does the next 10 years look like for me? Like what do I really want to do? Like what do I love? Like I was managing an athlete program for a disability support service at the time, Whatability, which I mentioned, and I love that. Like that was the perfect transition out of sport because like not only was I helping people, but it also had the sporting aspect to it and the sporting element because we were employing a lot of part-time and full-time athletes as support workers. So it was like we were helping family members, we were talking like we were helping like the parents, the kids and like the participants with the disabilities, we were helping the athletes because they need flexible employment. And I was like, well, this is the best thing ever. I was like, why would I leave this? But then I was like, I felt like there was this like there was this other thing that was calling me, and mental health was always an underline. I'm sure we'll touch on it in this conversation, but mental health has always been a part of my life, especially from when I was 17. And so been involved with Movember, and I was like, what does that look like? So I thought, okay, well, I want to have the tools to be able to help my friends and family. Like that's the at a core. Like at a core, this is what I want. Well, how do I do that? Like I don't just want to be some guy who's just like talking shit on Instagram, like talking through a lived experience. Well, I think lived experience is great. I want to have like the legitimate, like what actually helps. So I was like, let's go back to uni. So I went back. I'm doing my postgrad in psychology at the moment, which is great. It's such a really great foundation of what actually helps and what actually works. I was like, okay, well, that's one piece of the puzzle. The second other piece of the puzzle is like, well, how do we like broadcast these messages, and how do we like get these messages out there? So I was like, okay, well, for me growing up, like athletes were so influential in community, right? Like everyone who I looked up to when I was a kid, they were athletes, right? Like there were guys like Corey Parker, Paul Harrigan. These are like NRL players, by the way, because that was my sport that we loved growing up. And so I was just like, well, whatever they were doing and talking about, like that's what I wanted to do. Like I remember when I first came into the professional system at Bronx, Corey Parker, he was a captain at the time, played Queensland, played Australia. He bought his first house when he was 18 and made his NRL debut when he was 18. And so in my head, I was just like, well, if I could do that when I'm like 20, maybe I'll be like half as good of a player as what he'll be. And so I had like all these goals to do that. And so anyway, fast forward, when I was like, how do we get these messages out there? I was like, well, I'm lucky. I've got so many incredible relationships through my time at Whatability, especially my time through sport, because like sport's such a small world. And so I was like, well, I'll lean on these relationships and just have conversations. And so I was like, let's start a podcast. Like, let's just do these, have conversations. It's not about the fact of like preaching what works and what doesn't work, because I don't know. Like I'm just figuring it out. So I was like, instead of going it in that point of view, why don't we go in the point of view where it's like, let's learn. Like let's just go on this journey of learning and talk to people who are like super influential in their own space. And it's been incredible. Like to be honest, everyone that's come on have pretty much been friends, which I'm super fortunate for. And if they haven't been friends, they've been like really like warm introductions on people who we know. So there's like a level of trust there. There's a level of safety there. If there's anything that they say on the podcast, like I'm happy to take that out. But it's like, it's kind of like this, like you have like a really comfortable setting and they're just willing to be open and vulnerable. Because once they're willing to be open and vulnerable, then I guess it makes it okay for the rest of us. And I guess that's kind of the preface of the podcast. And so, yeah, obviously like a long tangent from your question. But yeah, essentially like what I'm doing now, I love. Yeah.
We used to go camping with the Harrigans every year at Crescent Head from when I was 3 or 4, and Paul was the nicest guy who genuinely cared about people. Everyone looked up to him, Hipgrave told. I shouldn't have taken that bit out. Then on the field, he was just so tough, aggressive and mentally strong. Everything about him, the player, was awesome. What I took from him most, though, was being a good person off the field.
Best ever. Paul Harrigan. I think I just mentioned it before. He's
correct.
Like,
that's why I said that.
Yeah, I love that, man. He was a role model for me. He's the type, like he's a busy guy, you know, Paul. Like he was one of the best players in the NRL growing up, like when we were growing up, right? And so he was like this tough dude, like so like feared on the field. And then he had an incredible like commentating career afterwards. He was on like the football show, like the footy show. It was like one of the biggest like sporting shows for the NRL, like growing up. But he was also like our family friend. Like his parents were like really great friends with my grandparents. We'd holiday every year together. Like he'd be the dad that's like playing touch with all us kids, and we'd be like running around. I remember I got a photo with I'm sitting on his lap and I'm like doing this little like weird little thing with my head and my thumb. I don't know. But he was like such an incredible guy, and that was something that I looked up to, because obviously like you look up to him because he's an incredible player and he played in the NRL, and that's great. But it was like that personal connection, and you'd hear like other people, the way they talked about him behind his back was so like, it was so incredible and so nice. And it was so like, he was just so well respected. And so he's kind of like the person who I kind of want to be like, right? Like he was he was respected, but he was also kind and just a good person. Like I lost my granddad a couple months ago, right? And so and like Paul was such a big part of our like lives when we were like on holidays, right? And they obviously had the connection between his parents and like my grandparents. Came to the funeral, like, which was on the Gold Coast, which was so far away from Newcastle. He came all the way, and we're like, mate, thanks so much for coming. He's like, there's no way I would miss this. And it was just like, and I actually asked him if he wanted to come on like my podcast as well, like purely from the sense of like respect him so much. And I think the conversations are so good. Like even what we're doing now, like this conversation, it's almost like a little time capsule. And so when I have conversations with mates, like I sort of look at it like that. Whereas like they might not be the biggest personality or brand. Sometimes they might be, but sometimes they might not be. But it's like a little time capsule. And so when I was talking to Paul, we were just talking about like mental health and like how it's evolved over time from like when he started playing to where it is now, and what he does for his like body now, because he's fit, mate. Like you look at a lot of guys who've finished up and retired from professional sport, not just NRL, but like any sport. He's done it so well, and he's had some big head knocks. Like he's had like a brain bleed on his brain from when he was playing, and now he's just like, he's fit, he doesn't really drink, he's super clean, he trains well, he's got a great community. And I'm like, that's the guy, man. That's the guy. Yeah.
Sounds like you found an underlying purpose. And I think you spoke about the balance of burnout.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really believe in burnout if it's something that you're so passionate about. And I spoke about it before, like I haven't had leave a whole year. Like I don't feel like I need it.
But how do you balance it though? Because like even coming in here, like you're talking about, like, you've got a full-time job.
Yeah.
And you do this, and I see how many podcasts that you're pumping out.
Yeah.
Like how are you finding the balance between that? Or is it just because it's something that you love?
I love it.
Yeah.
And there has to be an element of sacrifice, I guess. If you're trying to build something like that, you've just got to know, you got to learn to say no.
Yeah. But how do you manage your energy levels? Sauna. We had a beautiful sauna.
We did have a beautiful sauna and ice bath. I have a Whoop obviously as well.
Yep.
I know you like them. I set it at 5 every day, 5 a.m, my alarm.
Yep.
And that goes off no matter what. I found that to be an amazing way to balance it.
Gotcha.
Because if I'm staying up late, I'm like, that alarm's going off.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I have to go to bed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think managing it, if it comes back to the question, I definitely focus on sleep.
Yeah. Well, like that's such a huge part of it. But I love what you said around like doing things that you love, like you get energy from it. Like I got a lot of people, even recently, a lot of family members actually, they're like, you're doing too much, you know, like, and similar to yourself, like work full time. The podcast is a full-time job in itself. You know, it's in its infancy. So, and then also like studying psychology as well, then try and fit like training. I still love, I train at a really high level, and then try and fit like trying to date and like hang out with friends and hang out with family members. And it's just like, there's so much there, but I was like, I don't want to stop anything. Like, what am I going to stop?
Exactly.
Am I going to stop my job? No, I love that. Am I going to stop the podcast? No way. Psychology, like no, I can't. Like there's like these things, and it's hard because it takes so much time, right? And yes, there's get to a point where like you might be staying up a bit later than what you would have liked to. Even this trip, like I was telling you before, like I had the flu last week. Like you'll probably hear me cough throughout this podcast. You know what I mean? Like I'm just coming out of like having influenza, and I had this trip booked into Melbourne, had a speaking engagement this morning. We teed up this podcast like months ago, and I was so excited for it. And to be honest, like if I wasn't excited last week, I'd be like, my body needs a break. Like I haven't trained this week. Training's my coping mechanism. Like I need to train to like be neutral. I haven't trained this week. So I think that's why like I'm a little bit out of whack at the moment. But I was so excited to come here. I was so excited to talk to you, to sauna, to ice bath, to do this whole, have a steak. Like that stuff gives me energy. And also like meeting really cool people. Like these things, like it's wild. Like when you just put yourself out there, like how like good things happen. Like good things just happen when you put it out there, and when you're actually in your flow and when you're in your purpose. Like these, like my day job is I work with the RLPA, like the Rugby League Players Association. So, and I work with guys who are transitioning out of the game. So whether that's like they're retiring, they got medically retired, they transition over to a different competition, or they just don't get a contract, right? And there's like this, obviously a few different people do it really well, people do it not so great. But the guys who are like in flow, or the guys who are like have purpose and passion, like they have energy. They have energy when they talk about it. Like they sit up in the chair a little bit more and their voice sort of elevates. And like even talking to you this more, like today, like when we talk about the podcast or a podcast episode that you've really loved, you can see it in your eyes. You can see like your posture sits out. You can see it in people's mannerisms, which is so important. And I think like when you have that, like you'll have longevity in that. There was one of the speaking engagement that we did this morning, Mads, she's been doing her podcast for 6 years. And I was like, how have you been going so long? I was like, do you get sick of it? She's like, no. So I love what I do. She's like, I align with really good brands. Like I don't align with brands who don't align with my values. Like I have people on who are interesting, who I like talking to. She's obviously a very curious person. So she's like ready to just like do this forever.
In what ways has your purpose evolved, both personally and professionally?
Good question. Yeah, good question. I think I've intertwined my personal purpose with my employment purpose. So, because what I want to be doing, I want to do forever, you know. And I said there's a few things to my employment like outlook or the way I look at it, right? So, I said like if I can be genuinely helping people and make a living off it, then that's where I sit. Like Ray Dalio, he's a hedge fund manager for Bridgewater. Over in the States, like incredible guy. He's got a book called Principles. If you've read it, it's incredible.
Well, making money was good. Having meaningful work and meaningful relationships was far better. To me, meaningful work is being on a mission I become engrossed in, and meaningful relationships are those I have with people I care deeply about and who care deeply about me.
Bro, I love your research. I haven't said it yet, but man, you're the most well-researched interviewer I have ever been across. Like, so
Thanks,
well
man.
done, man. So
Appreciate
like
you.
that is it. Meaningful work, meaningful relationships, and I'll go one step further of adding like meaningful experiences. If I can sit in that space, then that's it. And so when I think about like my values of like what I want to do, like helping people is one of them, connection's one of them, grit. So like hard working over like a long period of time, being kind, genuine and being an authentic, like kind of go hand in hand. So like they're like my personal values, right? And so when I look at my, like what I want to do personally, it's like the meaningful work and meaningful relationship. But I was like, I also want to make a living. And what I want to do for that living, I want to have fun doing it. So I look at the three things that I'm doing now. It's like the RLPA, helping past players. It's the podcast, and it's also the psychology. Like they probably take up my 3 biggest time commitments at the moment. It's like, I love that. Like I love that so much. Like I could do these things forever, and I want to make all 3 of them work. Like people are like, oh, would you stop working if the full podcast was full time? And I'm like, respectfully, I could make the podcast go full time if I was 100% in it. Like where there's a commercial element to it. Like where we've got income coming in through it, through partners that align with our values within like 6 months, 12 months. You know what I mean? So that could be an opportunity, but that's not the play for me. Like I wouldn't want to change anything. I love what I do in my workspace. I love what I do in the podcast space. So it's like, it's about balancing both of them. And to be honest, I'm privileged. I'm very lucky that I work with an employer that is accommodating, and they love what I do. Like our COO, him and his family, like a lot of the staff members like listen to the podcast. Like, you know what I mean? A lot of them, like they love the swimming podcast. They love when the NRL players jump on, because it's like, it's obviously an insight for them. Even I remember talking to our chief operating officer. He said to me, his 12-year-old daughter loves the podcast. And I was like, oh my God, I got to stop swearing in this podcast. You know what I mean? Because I was like, I've got so many like young people like listening to it. But it was almost like a pinching moment. I was like, no, I don't want to change anything I'm doing.
I love how you're so all in. And I think I heard you talk about like the journey, and once you've hit it, people are like, how the hell did you get it all? You're trying to think of the right way to describe it, but everything you're doing in your life is for an underlying purpose, but that is just, it's 10 years away. And I said it to you before, that's why you've had that mindset, I guess, even when you were 17 playing rugby as well.
It's like the overnight success that took 10 years to get to, right? You know what I mean? Like, you mentioned when I was like 17, like I signed my first professional contract when I was 17. For me, like, you know, when you're growing up, you always think like, oh, I would love to be a professional footy player. Like that would be so cool. But you never think that it's actually attainable. And it never really was for me. I had my mum who was like heavily academics. Like she's like, you're gonna do uni, you're gonna so I was thinking about, I was like, oh, I'd love to own a business one day. So I was thinking about what I was gonna do And if footy worked great. I had a really great game of footy. Did all the like junior representative footy. Like I did all that. Very fortunate I got to captain like most representative sides. So I recognized that I was like a good player for my age group, right? But I was like, there will be other things that I will do after this. But it wasn't until I got offered a contract by the Gold Coast Titans. I was originally with the Brisbane Broncos, who was like an hour up the road, in their like junior development system. And because they were the best, like they had such a great junior development. So I was like, I've been with them for like maybe like 5 years, since like under 13s. And so when I was 17, I had this really great game, the schoolboys game, and the Gold Coast Titans, my hometown, they offered me like a 4-year contract, which was insane. Like minimum wage for an NRL player is like 120K. And I was 17. I'm like, this is insane. I'm like, and this is more like for me, mate, I didn't grow up wealthy. Like we're very like middle class, like dad's a lift mechanic and mum's a teacher. So while like we didn't go without in terms of like going away for sporting events, but we didn't get the new bikes, like we didn't get the new clothes, like hand-me-downs. Like and that was fine. We had the best upbringing ever, but not super wealthy. When I signed that, I was like, what? So when I got offered that, I was like, wow, like this is going to be me. This is my next career. And so I was committed to the Titans. Not committed, so I was going to sign with the Titans. But then we went to the Broncos to let them know that like this is what's happening. I was like, there's no way they're going to match this. Like this is an incredible deal. Like it's 4 years, like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And Bronx matched it. And I was like, far out. I was like, what do I do now? I've got like my hometown team, and I love the Titans growing up. But I was also really loyal to the Broncos because they had invested so much in me. And at the time, the Bronx, they were, their like forward pack was like the state of origin pack. Like they were the most representative, like Corey Parker, who I mentioned before, he was the captain of the side. And so they had like all these guys who I really looked up to, Matt Gillette, Andrew McCulloch, Josh Maguire, Sam Thade, guys in the rugby league world. I know I'm in Melbourne here, but these are guys who I all looked up to. And so I thought, well, for my development, like I'll go to the Brisbane Broncos and stay with them. But once I signed that contract, circling back to your question, I was like, well, this is what I'm going to be doing for the next 10 years. So I'm all in, like everything. And I was so like, I think I was so just enthralled on it, where I was like, how can I be the best? And for me, like my little edge was like being tough, was being aggressive. Like I recognized that I didn't have probably the same level of skill as everyone else. So I was like, I want to do all the other things, like train really hard. Like I want to be the hardest trainer. I want to be the most competitive guy out there. And so that's what I did. I went all in. And I think that was probably the biggest learning that I took from professional sport to now leaving professional sport. Was like, well, I'm all in. And that looks like and that's in the mental health psychology space. That's the podcast, that's the psychology, that's helping players. So it's like, it was such a great learning from footy.
Do you see a downside to being all in everything that you do?
Yeah, for sure. Like relationships can suffer. Had a conversation with my sister like yesterday, which is wild. She sort of chipped me. She chipped me about like not spending enough time with family. And like, man, like for those who know me, like friends and family are my like they're my thing. Like I love them unconditionally. Love that. Like everything I'm doing now is for my friends and family. Like everything I'm doing is for them. But I can see how relationships can like suffer. And don't get me wrong, like we have a great relationship. But from me spending like a couple nights a week with them to maybe like one night a week with them, or like maybe one dinner every 2 or 3 weeks, like that's just, and I guess it's like probably a reality thing for them. Like it's like, that's what they're used to. So now that's what they're getting. Whereas like when you're in footy, like I had every second day off pretty much. Like your body's just recovering as much as you're training, or like most nights are free. But now like I'm up at 4:30. I want to train. I want to study before work or do podcasts before work. And then I'll work from 8 till 4. And then I want to train afterwards. And then I'm studying till 8, 9 o'clock at night, and then I'm going to bed. So it's like, it's a busy time, but I know like this is just a season of my life. Like I don't want to be working this hard forever, but I would much rather do it now while I don't have kids, I don't have a family, I don't have a dog. Like this is just similar to you, man. Like you're in that grind stage.
I
and
resonate
like,
with that a lot.
And that's so fun. And so it's kind of like the ability to be able to articulate to them that it's like, this isn't forever. Like I love you guys unconditionally, but I do want to go hard, and I'm not going to apologize for that. But you get it better than anyone, man. You know,
100%.
Yeah.
And to be honest, one dinner every 2 or 3 weeks, I'd be lucky.
It's nice, right?
Lucky. I mean, no, I'd be lucky to do that.
Yeah, that's
It's
what
like
it
once
would be
every 2
nice.
months.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 months sometimes.
Wild. Are your
Crazy.
family here? They're in Melbourne?
They're like 20 minutes away.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should. Oh, well, Mum will listen to this and she'll abuse me.
Yeah.
I saw a quote that said the rarest human trait is consistency. Do you believe in that at all?
The rarest?
The rarest human trait is consistency.
Well, I think I feel like consistency is just attributed or correlates with success. I feel like people who are just consistent, will outlast everyone else. Apply that to anything. Like we did a podcast with a guy called Kobe Jones over in the States, Premier League player. Also played in the LA Galaxy for a number of years. Dark kid, not many black kids playing soccer. And he played a 15-year career, went to the Olympics, incredible. And the biggest thing out of that conversation was consistency. While he was talented and he was great, he was in the game for 15 years. And so it's just it kind of ties back to what we were talking about before, when I was 17, everything I'm doing then I want to do for the next 10 years. And even now, everything I want to be doing now, I want to be doing for the next 10 years. It's all a consistency thing, and you almost outlast everyone. Think about the podcast game, right? How many podcasts are out there at the moment? It was just you would know the stats. What is it? It's if you do 10 episodes, 20 episodes, you're in the top 10%.
Top 1%. I thought it was top 1%. 20 was top 1%.
What exactly? And you're almost at 50 episodes, bro. And and similar. I'm at 70 episodes, and it's just we are in our infancy. I look at guys look at Rogan. How long's Rogan been going for? 15 years. Even Chris Williamson, he was doing one a week. Then when he was doing 3 podcasts a week for 3 or 5 years, and now he's regarded as one of the best podcasters ever. And for me, I don't know if I want to be considered to be the best podcaster. I don't know if that's a goal for me. I enjoy podcasting. I like having conversations, but I don't know if that's going to be the dream. I don't know if I want to be a podcaster. There's other things to me that I really enjoy that I probably want to do. It's the all-in thing, but doing something consistently, that's just attributed to success. The best players in sport, the best players in business, the best players in anything, they've just been doing it longer, right? And so it's just think about that for a second. Consistency. It's about staying in something for so long. So what are the biggest things that will stop consistency? It's barriers, and it's probably falling out of love with it. So that's probably the biggest thing. How many times are you going to get to the stage where you're I'm falling out of loving something, especially when it becomes a job, right? You look at athletes all the time. I've been through it personally. When playing rugby league in the NRL was the goal, the dream. It was great. But there was times where I was a couple years into it. I'm stuff this, man. This is it's a hard thing. Your body's getting bashed all the time, and you're curious about other things. So it's just well, is this something you want to stay in and not stay in? And obviously, it's a roller coaster, but people do that in careers. People do that in everything. So it's keeping it fun, keeping it playful, keeping it interesting, mixing it up a little bit. Because I think if you're doing the same thing over and over, it can get a bit stale. But even in the podcast game, changing it up, different settings, different guests, different themes, cooking steaks for people. This stuff's fun. This stuff's really cool. So yeah, man, I love that. What you said, that consistency piece is huge.
20 years from now, you give anything to be this exact age, exactly this healthy in this exact moment. Take a second to enjoy it.
20 years, what are we going to be? We're going to be 47 and 44. Oh, 47, 49.
I wish.
49. Yeah, I think that's it's a longevity thing, right? I think, but then I also think if we really look after ourselves, we're obviously working hard, we're doing things, but if we looking after ourselves with good food, good diet, training really well, have good community, to be honest, man, when I'm 50, I want to be training the way I'm training now. I don't want to stop training, but the things that I'm doing, when I look at when I'm 50, I still think I'm going to be going for it. When I talk to people who I really look up to, role models who are 50, 60, 70, who are kind of where I want to be. Like they're kind of like the role models, like where I want to be like financially or with their kids or with their families or how that looks, like their situation. That's the situation I want to be. When I talk to these guys, I like sort of like pick and poke around and I was like, man, why do you keep working? Like you've got so much cash, like you've got a beautiful family, like you don't need to work. And they're like, man, like they're just so curious. They're like, I've got a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades left of learning. Like I'm like it's like I've got so much time. Like why would I stop? So that ties into a piece of like, it's never too late to start something. Like I had a friend who he was a chef for 20 years, bought and sold restaurants, big wine guy, incredible foodie. But he got to the point where he was like 42, 3 kids, wife, beautiful family, like not super wealthy, but he had this whole like career change and went into studying pharmacy. And so he went back to uni, went back on the dole, like getting Centrelink, like, and he was like studying. He was a full-time student. His partner was also studying, but like not studying, working, but looking after 3 kids. And so he became a pharmacist, bought a pharmacy, built this pharmacy, just sold it for a couple $1 million just before. Very like wealthy dude, right? And so it was just like, that's just the perfect example of like, it's not too late to start something because you got so much time. Mate, we're like, I think when you're like 20 and 30, a year or 2 years or 5 years seems like such a big time because you're only so young. Like you've only had that much time. Like if you're 20 and you're talking about 5 years, that's a quarter of your life, bro. But imagine when you're like 50, 60, 70, it's like that couple years is nothing. So if you want to start a degree, start that degree. If you want to start a business, start that business. Like our ability to manage risk or mitigate risk is so great when you're younger. So mix it up, change it up if you want. Like if that's something that you really want to do. Like I had a career playing professional sport. That was incredible. While I loved it, I wouldn't change anything. It was just a part of my life. And I'm happy that that's actually like springboarded me into what I'm doing now. And what I'm doing now, like I really hope I'm doing this for the next 10 years. Like, but however, I'm sure that's going to evolve and that's going to change. And what I do next is going to be off the back of all these experiences that I've had. Yeah.
Layers of paint to build a mountain.
Brother, love that, man.
That was you.
Yeah.
I resonate with that a lot. I resonate that with a lot because I see a lot of people, they start something and they don't, you can tell they're not in it for the right reasons. What you're doing now, what do you get out of what you're doing now? I mean, and this is the podcast. This comes back to the podcast. I mean, I'm just trying to think of the right way to ask the question, but like, what does it do to you when you sit down with someone and you have an open and vulnerable conversation?
There's so many like layers to that, right?
Yeah.
Like there is layers of paint that build a mountain. I'm pretty sure that was a Chris Williamson quote. Yeah. That I stole and adopted and will give credit to because it was a beautiful quote and I have written up on my mirror. It's great. But what the podcast does for me, so many things. Like I don't even know where to start. Like the first one is like it's like the rapport piece. Like I get to sit down with my friends and have a really cool conversation. Like I was telling you before off air, like I really like doing something before the podcast. Like that's a really great thing for me. I get to hang out with my friends. It's awesome. Like so much fun. But then when you get into the nuts and bolts of it, of sitting down and like the ability to be able to take the stigmas out of mental health and out of these types of conversations is huge. Because you think about like, how do we really like move the needle of mental health and how do we make genuine impact and genuine change? Like, how do we do that? And I think, well, if you've got people who are so influential in their community, and for me, like sports athletes, like they're it. Because like Australia, we're such a sporting culture, right? And for me, like sport was so huge growing up. So if they can be seen talking about their own struggles and their own vulnerabilities, then it makes it okay for the rest of us, right? And so like when I have a conversation with someone and they're open and they're vulnerable and it's a side to them that you probably haven't even seen before, and they do that because there's a level of trust here, and I'm fortunate to be in that position that they feel comfortable that they can. But then off the back of that, when you hear like mum and dads, when you hear like other friends, other people like get in contact with you and message you to say, that's changed my life, or like, I didn't know I was feeling that way because like I hadn't been able to articulate it before and they did such an amazing job. Or it's like, I'm not weird because this person is so like such a role model and they're talking about it. Like we talked about Brad Maynard before. Like it was just like there's so many instances like that in these conversations, and we hear it all the time. Like it's so wide. I'm sure you get these messages as well, where it's just like that conversation or that reel, like that just hit me, like that the speaking gig that we did this morning. I'm talking about my friend Regan, who we lost to suicide when I was 17. I'm happy to talk about it if you'd like, but he was what we came to realize later, that before he committed suicide, he was in and out of hospital, and what they later come to think that probably was undiagnosed bipolar. Photographer of the event this morning came up to me in tears, and she's like, "That hit me so hard when you were talking about that," because she's like, "I don't hear many people talking about that, like depression and anxiety and a few other things." Like obviously, so take your pick on like what else is out there. But she's like, it struck a chord with me so much. And then she just opened up about her own struggle over the last couple of years and how she's been struggling with work. And she was like, she was so grateful that someone was able to talk about it. And there's a thing with shared vulnerability, man. You've probably come to realize it on this podcast, that when you're able to be vulnerable with someone, they're more likely to be vulnerable with you. And that's not just in a podcast setting. That's in like any setting. That for friends, for family, like even like, the best conversations I have with mates are like when we're doing something, like when we're doing a gym session, when we're surfing, when we're running, when we're doing just some sort of activity. Maybe it's a male thing. Girls are much more better at it than what we are. But when we're doing something and I feel like that this person, friend, family, colleague, whatever, might be struggling with something, and they're like a little bit more reserved, or they're just like naturally not a big talker, I might talk about some things that might be similar or things that like I might be struggling with. And it's so weird, bro. Like it opens up this door and they're able to be vulnerable with you. And you can see it in the podcast, and I'm sure you've done it as well, where it's just like afterwards, like it's sort of like a purge, just like a dump, and they get it off their chest. And then afterwards, like, oh, that was the best podcast I've ever done. Or like, I feel like you're showing me a clip, but like before, you're like, I feel so good. I feel so amazing. And it's almost like a relief for them. And they get like energy from it because it's like a weight off. They might have been struggling with it for a long time. So like, man, that shared vulnerability piece is huge. Yeah.
You said when Regan passed away that you didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
What did that look like for you? And you said you didn't even go to his funeral.
No, it's fuck, I regret it so much, man.
Yeah.
It was like so I was 17. Regan. I really love talking about Regan. He's such a good dude, man. So when we were younger, me and this guy called Regan Grieve, we were both like captain of our state team. We were both roommates together for this like state carnival. He was like my best friend in camp. Like we just do everything together. Him and another guy called Kurt DeLewis. And he was like, he's the best player, bro. Like he was our captain. Like we both got to be captains of the side. And he was like funny, respected, best footy player in our age group, like loved by everyone. Girls frothed him, like the boys thought he was the best man ever. And I was just like, oh, this guy's awesome, right? And so we both got picked in the Australian schoolboys team. That was like a 6-week tour of England and France, right? So we had this incredible tour coming up, but he actually broke his leg in the trial leading into that, so he couldn't go overseas. So we had this I had this awesome trip over in England and France, playing footy over there. It was amazing. I came back. Regan actually wanted to catch up, like when I got back, but I felt bad. I know, to be honest, I don't remember this. My mum told me this. She's like, you didn't want to see him because like you just had this incredible trip and you didn't want to make him feel bad, which again, regret so much. But we end up later came to find out that he was like in and out of hospital during that time between like Christmas and Australia Day. I remember getting a call from Kurt DeLewis, who's a dear friend. All three of us were like really good friends in that camp. And we found out that like Regan had committed suicide on Australia Day 2015. And bro, it was such a shock. It was such a shock to me because he was the guy that like everyone looked up to and everyone respected and everyone loved. And we I've got so much time for him and so much respect for him. And it was I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't understand it. And I had so much love for him. And so it was just like, when he was just gone, like, that didn't make sense. And I could hear it in Kurt's voice when he was on the phone, because he obviously loved him as well. And they were probably a lot closer than what Regan and I were. And it was just this thing. And I just couldn't understand. I was 17. Like I had no idea how to process that. And so I kind of just like, when you say like, what does it look like? I feel like I just put it in a box and I just like pushed it away and I like didn't address it. And I didn't address those emotions because I didn't know how to. And later, like I spoke to my mum about it and she's like, we didn't want to bring it up with you because we didn't want you to be upset. Like natural parents, like they just want the best for you, right? So they didn't want to bring it up because like we didn't want to make you feel sad. And so yeah, like I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't like, but it was so weird because like unconsciously it was such a huge part of everything I was doing. Like from when I was 17, like I went into a professional rugby league system where like guys were super alpha, super high, like a high testosterone environment, didn't talk about their feelings, didn't talk about what was going on. Well, that was my perception of it anyway. And I fucking hated that. And I wanted to change that. And then that's when I got involved with Movember, did like Movember events. And so like, I sort of like subconsciously knew that like this whole thing was part of that, but I wasn't really like addressing it like the actual core thing. I don't know if it was like seeping out in other ways because I wanted to be that guy my friends can talk to. Even now I want to be that guy. But I remember doing all these things. Like that's why I first got involved with Movember. But what it looked like, yeah, it was just like pushing it down and not addressing it.
What happened when you did address it?
It was it felt like a weight lifted off. What happened was started the podcast. I was on a podcast called The Unlaced with Jake here in Melbourne, actually, and like it was weird because it's a mental health and sport podcast, and like I probably knew it was going to come, but it was like one of the early podcasts that I'd featured on, and he's like, like Keek's like, how'd you get into mental health? And I was just like, not taking it back, but I was just like, it's probably because of my friend Regan. And I started talking about it, but I felt like I didn't do it justice when I was talking about it. And I was really angry at myself that's why I take the time, like you were just like, I take the time to really address like how great of a person Regan is. And, but what came off the back of that podcast was that he actually did create a really beautiful clip, which is still pinned on my Instagram now. You would have seen it. Your research is insane. But it was such a beautiful clip. And Regan's mum, Angela, actually reached out to me. And she sent me a message. And I can't remember what the message said, but it was something along the lines of like, thank you for doing this. And I was like, fuck, like, and then all these things started like creeping back in from when I was 17. Like, fuck, you're a piece of shit. You didn't go to the funeral. Like, you didn't talk to her. Like, you haven't spoken. Like, all these things. And I was like, I messaged her. I was like, do you mind if we just jump on a call real quick? And what we did, and we jumped on a call and we just talked for like an hour, bro. And it was like, it started off with like me crying and being saying like, I'm so sorry I wasn't there at the funeral. And then also like, I should have asked like, do you mind if I talk about him? And she said her biggest fear when Regan passed away was that that his name would be forgotten and that people would forget about him. And so she's like, you talk about him as much as you like. And she's like, you celebrate him. It's just like, don't ever feel like you can't like talk about him as much as you can. So I make a point of every podcast I go on, because that's usually a big conversation, right? Like, why'd you get into mental health? Like, where did the podcast come from? Excuse me. A lot of it was from Regan, right? And like in that year, we lost 16 people, 16 players in the NRL, in rugby league communities to suicide that year, in that 1 year. Like wild. Like, and it's such a prominent thing in, not only in sport in males, but just like in community in general. Like suicide is still the biggest killer of males ages between 17 and 44, or like 22 and 44. Like that's a huge statistic, man. And so, yeah, when I addressed it, it was like, but it's actually, I don't know if I've told many people this, but like that night when I was talking to Angela, it was really great. Like it was a really great weight lifted off. I called my mum. I told them that I spoke to Angela, and then she told me all these things about like when I was back in 17, how they didn't want to make me upset, the things that I spoke about before. But actually that day I was sort of like, I was going through this like transition period where like I really loved the job that I was in at Whatability, but I really wanted to do the mental health stuff. And I was like, I was really stressed. I was also going through like a relationship breakdown. So there was like a heap of like real like big stresses in my life. I remember thinking like, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go in to tell work that I'm not gonna carry on, which is hard because I loved them so much, and so that was a big. I felt like I was letting them down a little bit. Also with all the like the relationship stuff, and it was like almost like stress like coming out of me, and so that night I went to sleep. I didn't get sleep that much, but I felt like I was itchy. It's like I felt like there's mosquitoes like in my throat was scratchy, and then I woke up at like 3 a.m. My lips had like swollen. I had like all these like hives, like sort of like under like my armpit, like in my glands. And I was just like, fuck. I was like, what? I was like, what is this? And then I had a friend who had something similar. He talked about his throat would swell up and his lips would swell up. And what he came down to was stress. And so what I think it is now was just like, my body was like, it was like physical symptoms of stress, which I had never experienced before. And so like, I was like, had a cold shower before going to work because I was going in to tell like my boss, who was also my really close friend. And so I was like trying to meditate, trying to like calm myself down. It was like, to be honest, it was like one of the most like stressful experiences of my life, just because there was so much happening. I've never taught anyone that before. And it was just like, and then I went in, I told them like, and I started like crying, and I told them about, and because I'm really close with these guys, I told them about all the symptoms that I was having. And they're like, man, like you need to relax, like you don't need to relax, but we need to like talk about this stuff. And that was so amazing. That was so good. And then it just got onto this thing where like, what I did for that, like I talk to my psych all the time. I try and talk to my psych like once every couple months, and then probably more so when I'm going through the thick of it. So that time I was talking to her like every week, just to try and understand like what was going on. But that was a super like tricky time in my life. But then like I worked through it, and I got through it, and there's been so much positive stuff that comes out of it. Like I'm so glad that I had that conversations with Ange. So happy that not that I left Waterbilly because I love Waterbilly, but that allowed me to do the stuff with the Players Association now. Podcast is doing really well. I get to study psychology. So it's like all the really hard things that happen have actually led to like positive change, which is cool.
I heard a quote from Heath Ledger the other day that I thought would resonate with you. Everyone you meet always asks if you have a career, are married, or own a house, as if life was some kind of grocery list. But no one ever asks if you are happy.
Yeah, that's a cool one. I think that's a point, right? Like the whole point is to be happy, and even delayed gratification, I think is like super important as well. Like it's one thing to be like I think we're very similar in the sense like we're happy to work hard to set ourselves up later on. Even when people say like take a break, like I don't need to have a whole weekend to feel more aligned, like and be happy.
Off, maybe.
Have an afternoon off. If I can have a coffee or a gym session with a mate, it's like that stuff sets me up. But like everyone's different, man. Like everyone, like some people might need a weekend, and that's so fine. Like it's whatever your thing is. Like for me, it's like find whatever it is that makes you happy, that lights you up. Whether that's like going for a surf, whether that's physical exercise, whether that's hanging out with the girls on a Friday night and watching a movie, like whatever that is, like that's so fine. But like, I think we can easily get caught up in the grocery list of like, I need the house tick, I need the fucking wife tick, I need the kids tick. And mate, to be honest, I fell in that trap. Like footy is in that environment. It's just like everyone's young. Everyone gets a lot of money young. Everyone has kids young. Everyone gets married young. So you just naturally fall into that. And I think I'm very blessed in the sense where like I've been in it. I was so close to a lot of those things, but now I'm also out of it, and I can look sort of like backwards and into it, where it's just like, while those things are great for some people, like it's not for everyone. And it's not, to be honest, man, it's not really for me. Like I've got a couple of houses. Like that's great. That's awesome. But I mean, like, fuck, I could sell. Like, I don't need them to be happy. You know, like it's like we operate on like this, like, if and when model. So like, when and if model. So like, when I get that thing, then I'll be happy. When I get that car, then I'll be happy. When I get that house, then I'll be happy. It's just like, that's not it, man. Like, it ties back into that, like what you said before with Ray Dalio. It was like meaningful work, meaningful relationship, meaningful experiences. Like this is an experience for me. Like coming down, like going over to the States to do podcasts is an experience that brings me happiness. Hanging out with my friends, like that brings me happiness. Like all this stuff is so beautiful and so fun. And it's so hard because like I've been there and I get it. And to be honest, there's sometimes where I fall back into that. We're like, oh, it actually would be really cool to get that thing. Like it's easy to fall back into it. But I think if you can like take a step back a little bit, zoom out, like physically think about like zooming out and being like, what's really important? End of the day, it's like meaningful relationships, connection, peace, meaningful work. That stuff's fine.
What does it mean to you to be vulnerable?
To be vulnerable, I think like for me to be vulnerable personally, it's like being truthful to my friends and family. And it's not a lot of people, bro, to be honest. Like I've probably got 3-4 mates who I'll like lean on for certain things and like different things for different topics for different friends. When I just want to go have a belly laugh, I got mates for that. But when you say like, what does vulnerability mean to me? It's like being able to express that to them and feeling like it's okay. Like there's so many, like growing up, I wouldn't talk to anyone about it, my shit. Never in a million years. Like just because it wasn't shown to me, like I didn't know how to. And you start going through a few experiences where you're like, oh, actually like talking about these things and expressing these things are great. It might be to a friend. It also might be to a psychologist. It might be just someone who's preferred. I'm a big believer in that, especially for like those more extreme things, for whatever that might be. And we talked about bipolar. We talked about, even if it's like ADHD, OCD, depression, anxiety, suicide ideologies, whatever it might be. Like I'm a big believer in talking to someone who has like professional experience in that, because you're playing with people's lives at the end of the day. It's one thing to talk to friends and family, to be able to do an emotional dump, but not getting to the sense where you're like ruminating on ideas. I've fallen in that trap before, where it's just like, when I don't talk to my psych and when I don't talk to friends and I'm constantly internalizing things, I'm thinking about it more. And you start like having like worse thoughts, and you start thinking about like things in different ways where it's like, that's probably not the reality. You know what I mean? Like if you zoom out and you'd be like, when you're like, had a really good night's sleep and you're training well and you're like, you're thinking really clearly and you're like, this is how I should be thinking. It's like, oh, well, that's obviously not the case. But when you're like, well, for me, when I'm lack of sleep, when I've been sick, when I'm stressed, when something bad's happened and you start ruminating and I don't talk about what's going on, well, it's like, that's when these scenarios just like dramatize and then become so much bigger than what it is. But when you can be vulnerable and when you can talk about these things, it's like, you know what? Yeah, actually not that bad. You know what I mean? Like I had a terrible day yesterday. I had such a bad day. Like I think my sister chipped me. We spread my granddad's ashes in the morning, which was actually really beautiful. It was really great. But I miss him. Like I miss him, my granddad. He's a great guy. And like all these, like we've got some big projects happening at work that I want to do really well with. And like the final straw of the day, bro, like I left my laptop on the plane. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and my whole life is on this laptop, like the podcast or my study. I was like, I'm gonna have the best weekend of studying and work while I'm here in Melbourne. I'll do my events, but then like in my off time, I'll work and study. And like, I was sitting there like for an hour, like, can I get this laptop? And they're like, mate, plane's gone. Like, we don't have it. And I was like, oh my God, I was like, this is the worst day ever. Yeah. And I was spewing. And then I was driving back from the airport and I was just like, man, I was like, fuck, what are you gonna do? Like, you're just gonna sit here like in your own shit. You're just gonna ruminate. Like, what are you gonna do about it? Like, you can't change what's happened. Like, what are you gonna do about it? And I called a friend, and she was so great. Like, I was just like, do you mind if I just do like a little emotional dump right now? She's like, oh, like, give me your best rant. And I just ran for like 2 minutes, and I was like, you know what? It's actually not going to be that bad. Like, there's actually some really, like, I'm really excited to come to Melbourne. Some great things happening. But I just needed that, like, couple minutes, just emotional dump. And like, what I said to her and what I said to other friends, is like, I don't need you to fix anything for me. Like, I don't need you to, like, give me your opinion. I just need you to be there and listen to me, you know, and just, like, let me talk it out. And if I ask for help, great, I'll take it in. But a lot of the times, I think that's a great example for anyone who is on the other end or the receiving end. It's like, most of the time people just want to be there, just want you there to listen, which is super important.
Are there any other emotional dumps that you've gone through in your life that you'd be comfortable talking about?
Emotional dumps. Fuck yeah, heaps. There's so many, man. There's so many.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, like what themes? Because there's like, to be honest, man, there's so many.
One that stands out.
Emotional dump that stands out.
Or is there an event in life or something that you went through that was that required a bit of you, let's just say?
There's some big ones that I'm not ready to talk about.
Of course. Like I said, that you're comfortable talking about.
Yeah. I do. There's one that stands out. When I was about like 20. Yeah, I was about 20 years old. I was at the Bronx. And I was telling you, like, when I first signed that professional contract, I had my goal was to like make my NRL debut before I was 20. And I wanted to buy my first house before I was 20. Like these are my core goals, because I referred to my friend Corey Parker, my idol at the time. If he can do it, like maybe I'll be half the player. And so I put a heap of pressure on myself to do that. But I had a heap of injuries. Like it was hard because I was captaining like the under 20s Broncos competition, side. And so we would mirror the NRL side. So whenever they played, we would play before them. We'd be like the game before them. But it was like a tier below NRL, but I was training with the NRL side, if that makes sense. So you're like training with the main side, but then you drop back because you're obviously like you're a teenager, you're a kid. Course. And so putting a heap of pressure out, but I kept getting injured. I had a heap of like hamstring tears. And hamstring, like it wasn't like one of those ones where it was just like you would like an ACL, right? Where you'd like tear your ACL and then you'd be out for the year and you have to get back. Hamstring tear for me was just like I would tear, like I remember tearing my hamstring when I was 19 and like wanted to play State of Origin, wanted to play for the Australian under 20 side. Like these were goals and I couldn't do it. I think I did it first and then I fast tracked it. I tried to get my hamstring right so I could play in that competition, but then I'd tear it again. And I was like, well, that was silly. Like maybe let's take a little bit more time to get my hamstring right so I can go on. I can play for Australia. I can make my NRL debut. I can do all these things. I do all my rehab and then I would tear it again. I was like, Keeg, you're rushing this. Like you need to pull it back. And I had some really great physios around at the time. And they're like, well, let's really drag this out. We want to make sure your hamstring's strong. It's agile. You can do what you want. And it'd be like as simple as like, I remember I was doing a walking pass drill with my friend Jared Wallace, and I passed and I felt the click on my hamstring. I was like, no way. And he's just like, what? And I was like, I think I just tore my hamstring again. And he's like, man, this is like the 4th time you've done this. I was like, I don't know. And so I saw the physio. I remember being so angry. I was like, far out. Like this is the 4th time I've done it. And then
a horse would shoot you, mate.
Pay?
If you were a horse, would shoot you.
Fuck, isn't that a conversation? And I'll loop back to that because I know where you're going with this. That's why I've said it once, your research is insane. There was one, maybe like 3 months later since the 4th tear. It was like pre-season of like, I think it was 20 of like I don't know what season it was, 2017 year, whatever. And we're doing the pre-season and I was back, like we dragged out. We had a good off season. I kept training off season because I wanted my hamstring to be good. And I was training. I felt fit. I felt strong. I had a really good preseason on my belt. My hamstrings were feeling strong. This is great. This is going to be the year that I'm going to make my NRL debut. So pumped. We were doing a drill and I can't remember what happened. I don't know if I was striding out, whatever. Hamstring tore for the 5th time. Shattered. So shattered. Even the physios and like strength and conditioning staff was shattered for me because they know how much like this is like that in that off season we went to the AIS. We got the best opinions out of crew all around Australia to say like what is wrong with these hamstrings, like how do we get them right. Like obviously young, growing, like was like a bigger build for my like age at the time, like, and so it was just like what's going on. So we did all this work and like they were shattered, I was shattered. I walked in like just like trying to hide my emotions a little bit. And I remember this one guy who was like, again, like an idol for me. He was just like, fifth time, I was like, fuck, if you're a horse, we'd shoot ya. And I remember being like, oh, far out. Like, and to be honest, man, I have that written down in my journal. Like I've got that written down, and I opened up my journal from then, maybe like a couple months ago. I remember seeing that and I was like, oh shit, like I forgot about that. But there was two guys, Lachlan Moreno and Jack Reed. They put their arms around me and they were like super accommodating at the time. I think Matt Gillette was there as well. And like, we're so sorry, Keegs. And I remember just like finished training, like one of something, I can't do anything else. Iced it, finished, like watch the boys finish up training. Went to my car, sat in my car just in tears, like I'm like crying. Remember I called my dad and I was like, I'm done with footy. Like, cause it was like, like I said, if it was an ACL, I'd be fine. But it was like the fact that it was just like, I'd work so hard, snap, do it again, snap. Like it was just a roller coaster. I'm with my dad. I was like, can't keep doing this. I'm so over it. And obviously like 17, like super emotional at the time as well. And then I remember calling and then he's like, call Clinton, your manager, and tell him where you're at. And obviously I had so much pressure on myself to play. This is what it was stemming from. I called Clinton Chuck, my manager at the time, who was like kind of like a family friend as well. He's an incredible rugby league player at the time, like played state of origin. He did all the things, but he was also my manager, which was really cool. And I'll never forget it. He's pretty much just said like, Keeks, he's like, you're 20 years old. He's like, most guys aren't making their debut till they're like early 20s, mid 20s. He's like, take all the pressure off. Like you just need to relax. Like you just had so much like pressure to be a great player, right? And so I was like, I'll see it. To be honest, I wasn't sold, but a part of me was like, yeah, like I'll give it another crack. And so I left that. I actually ended up getting another contract with the Gold Coast Titans, who first offered me a first contract. And so I made a mid-season transfer, which was kind of like a breath of fresh air, to be honest. And so it was really cool. Like I was back playing with like my mates from school. I was back like surfing. My hamstrings got to be really strong. Obviously, I got to actually back playing. So I was playing like again the reserve grade, working my way through, and like was doing really good, like getting like a lot of player of the matches and stuff like that. And then that last game of the season, I ended up making like my NRL debut for the Gold Coast Titans. And so it was like all those hard things. And I know the question was around like, when was it like a big emotional dump? Like that was it, like with Clinton and my dad. And it was almost like a fucking like a purge, like a dump. But then they gave me perspective. And then don't get me wrong, it was a lot of hard work to get to making my NRL debut. But it was just like that reward was worth like the last couple of years of roller coaster. And to be honest, man, it adds to the story. Like it's another page for the book. It was super cool. Yeah.
You've referenced self-doubt in a few other of your conversations. Is that still something you battle with? And I assume it's something that without answering your question, that doesn't go away.
Yeah. Yeah. Self-doubt and like not feeling like you're good enough. Yeah. That's probably something that that's probably something I struggle with most, I think. I think it's probably similar for a lot of athletes or anyone who has had like somewhat of success in whatever field they're in. Yeah, like the feeling of like not being good enough is it's like it's a tough one. Self-doubt's natural. Like self-doubt for me came in the sense like initially when I was like playing and I didn't believe I had the skill level. Like if I drop a ball, like it's naturally for the boys to take the piss out of you because they want you to be better and they don't want you to drop a ball. But then for me, like my internal dialogue was just like you're an idiot. You don't deserve to be here. Why are they paying you so much money? You can't even catch a ball. Like, and so all these things like kept constantly. And so you try and overcompensate in the gym. You try and overcompensate in everything else. And I think like I took that out of sport. Probably into like my own personal life, to be honest, like, and that can be seen in like, probably like work can be seen in relationships. Like good example is say, like not feeling like you're good enough in a relationship, right? And I don't want to harp on this, but it's a good context for this question where it's just like, say you have a relationship breakdown and they might be seeing someone else and they might be talking to someone else or whatever it is, like in the relationship, outside the relationship, whatever it is. It's just like, that's sort of like evidence that for me, it was evidence that you're not good enough. So you're like, all right, well, I need to train more, I need to make more money. I need to be more alpha and more like personable. Like I need to build myself up like externally, which isn't the play at all. Like, and I know that now, but it was like, when you're in it, it's like, I need to do everything I can because like I've got other things telling me that I'm not good enough. You know what I mean? Like even when I was like medically retired from rugby league, that was almost like another thing where it's just like, oh, well, you weren't cut out to make the NRL. You weren't good enough to stay in there. Like you couldn't hack it like everyone else can. And I know that's not the case. Like I know that's not it. But in your head, you're kind of like, that's another piece of evidence to demonstrate that you're not good enough. And so like, all the hardest times in my life, like is usually when I'm the most fittest, to be honest. Like when I was medically retired, when we lost Regan, relationship breakdown, whatever it is, it's like I look back, I'm like, man, I look good, like respectfully. But I'd train so hard because I'd be like, even that in between stage when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, like there was obviously like a natural bit of uncertainty there. I'd be up at like 2-3 in the morning wide because my mind is racing because I was unsure of what I was going to do afterwards. So I'd be like, I'd just go run 10K at like 2-3 in the morning. And Mrs. at the time was like, what are you doing? But yeah, that self-doubt, I don't know, like, I don't want to say it does stay with you forever. Because I don't know, like I'm hoping it doesn't. Like that's something that I'm still trying to figure out. Like I don't have the answers to that. A big thing for self-doubt, probably like a good example was just like not feeling like comfortable with yourself, like not feeling comfortable. And that was like, and that's natural, like for people who are going through puberty. I think I felt that a little bit, especially when I came into the NRL system. But then when I got to be like comfortable, like in like how I operate and how I'm with people, like I got a lot of confidence from that. Like, don't get me wrong. When I say like I'm not, I've got self-doubt, I don't feel like I'm good enough. Like that's not for me at a core. Like it's a part of me, but it's not my whole me. So like when I like now I can feel like I can talk to anyone, to be honest. And I feel very comfortable with who I am and like my own values and everything like that. But like 19-year-old Keegan, 20-year-old Keegan probably struggled with that a little bit. So I think you can grow and I think you can mature, but there are certain aspects that like I'm still trying to figure out. I don't know if that makes sense. It does. But it's almost like a work in progress. And I referred to like fixing the outside things. Like I want to be like bigger and stronger. I want to be more successful. I want to have more influence. I want to have more money. I'm like, when I say it out loud, I'm like, that's like such superficial and external things. Like you got to do the work on your inside, right? And like, and I'm conscious of that. I know that's something that I want to work on. I know that's like why I talk to my like psychologist about it. But what else? Like, what does the work actually look like? Is it reading? Is it self-reflection? I'm sure there's a bunch of things. I don't know. I don't have the answers. Still figuring it out.
How do you differentiate between healthy self-reflection and detrimental self-doubt?
Yeah, it's a good question. That's a really good question. I think it's just probably like the way you look at it, right? Like say if your healthy self-reflection is just like, well, these are my flaws. How do I become better? And whereas like when it's destructive, where it's just like, these are my flaws, I'm never going to be able to fix them. Or like, these are my flaws and you ruminate, then I'm like, and there is no out. Well, there is. Like 100% we can grow, 100% we can be better. So I think a healthy reflection is when you can identify them, potentially even write them down. If that's your method of doing things, but then also thinking like, how can I get better? It's sort of like, it's like the podcast. Like a great example is the podcast. Like for me, like every like couple months, I'll sit down, I'll write down like all the things that are working, but then I'll write down like all the things that I'm not super happy with. Like initially, like everyone that was coming on were all friends. So I feel like I didn't need to do a lot of research because I knew them personally already. And that was great. But then part of me was like, well, if I want to be better, if I want to be a really great interviewer, then I need to do more. So what does that look like? It looks like catching up with them beforehand. It looks like calling their friends, calling their family members for background. It might be like listening to other podcasts they've done. So that's just a way of like, that is just a perfect example of like reflective, but also getting better. like you could also look on the flip side of that where it's just like, oh no, like you just like if you're an extremist, you might be like, oh no, it's just shit podcast, you're never gonna get better. Like just do what you do. You know what I mean? But like if you can look at like glass half full, helps, I think.
I like to think I'm a happy guy, but I'd get angry at the smallest things, or I'd be riding a big high and then be reduced to tears in just a matter of minutes. And the weird thing is you're aware of all of it the whole time. What did life look like for you at that stage?
Yeah, so what you're referring to is like my last concussion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So footy had a heap of concussions. My last big one was against Penrith, round 26. 2021. I went to do a tackle on Tavita Pangai, who's this big guy, came off second best. There's a video about it. There's the clip, obviously. That's gross to watch. But essentially my back of the head hit the ground and I was just out. But the symptoms that stuck around with me for probably the next like 6 weeks, 2 months, is that quote, right? So it's, my symptoms when I had the head knock, I had a few, so I was conscious of what my symptoms were. A lot of them were headaches. So I had a headache for about 2 months afterwards. Irritability. So part of that quote was just like, yeah, feeling like I was super happy, like my happy-go-lucky fun self. But then I'd be like brought down to tears for like really like not mediocre things, but just like random little things. But it's weird because you're like, your brain's recovering, right? So a good example was when it was my granddad's birthday, right? And we knew that we weren't going to have a lot of time with him left because his health wasn't that great. And I remember going in there, being like super angry. This is like a couple of weeks after like the last head knock. I remember being like super angry and super frustrated and super like aggravated and thinking of like all these like other places that I could have been. Wasn't really present in the birthday. And then I left like after an hour. I remember sitting in the car thinking like, wow, like you're probably not going to get that many more times with him. And I remember feeling so shit. I remember thinking like, what do you like? And just tears, like just crying. I remember thinking like what's going on? And so it's hard because you're aware of it. Like, your brain's recovering, but I don't know. It still felt really bad. But it's part of it. Like concussion is a super tricky conversation. It is a super complex conversation, and we're still learning. Like headlines are so quick, right? Like you can read a headline and it scares a lot of people, but science takes time. Like we're still learning about concussion. We're still learning about traumatic brain injury. We're still learning about all the intricacies of that, and I want to learn more about it. And I am very careful how I communicate this stuff because it's a complex issue. So yeah, that time of my life was just like, it's a bit of a wild period, to be honest, because you're trying to figure out all these things. Was life going to look like after the sport, while also like managing all these like emotions from like having a traumatic brain injury. Yeah.
What's your relationship with regret, and do you have any? I mean, yeah, I heard it asked the other day, and it's a hard question. Yeah. Do you believe in it?
Regret. Yeah, I float between the two. Like I think everything happens for a reason, right? So like I don't think I regret too much because everything that's happened's made me the person I am today. I think that's a pretty common response to that. But I think it's common because it's probably like a right thing to say. And it probably makes sense. Like all I've said it before, I've said it a few times, like all the hardest things that have happened to me in my life had led to positive change and positive impact. Like when we lost Regan, one of the like super tough, I've spoken about it today, but that got me into mental health. It got me into, jumping on board with my member, them like being medically retired, obviously like super tough, super tragic thing. But then also that got me into like studying psychology and doing the podcast. And to be honest, like while I loved rugby league and while I've loved my last 10 years since leaving high school, I wouldn't change any of that. Like respectfully, like I don't want to go back and play rugby league. Like even if you're like, kids, your brain's sweet, you can go back, whatever. I don't think I would. I love what I do now. Like and so when I think of regret, I was like, nah, like I don't regret any of that. Like I can't change the way I played. I was an aggressive style of player. Like I can't change the fact that I did that, but that's made me the person I am today. You know, I can't change the fact of all those head knocks that I got, but everything I'm going to be doing now, I'm going to be doing so I'm set up later on. So like my body's healthy, my brain's healthy. I can be able to articulate words. I want to be able to learn. I want to be a good speaker. I want to be a good partner one day. I want to be a good family member. I want to be a good son. I want to be a good, like I want to be a good friend. So these are all the things. And it's just like, while you can't change the past, like how can you learn from that and make it better in the future? Because I think that's what we're all doing. We're just trying to figure it out, right? Like that's the whole thing. Yeah.
I failed over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed.
Again, same thing. Learn, like fail fast. Like also fail, but like learn from it fast. You know what I mean? Like if you can learn something from like a previous fail, like it makes total sense. Like I don't think I have much more to add on that because I think it's pretty it just makes sense. Like if you fail and you don't learn from it, then it's like, well, what are you doing? Like what was the point of the even failure? You know what I mean? Like whether that's in like sport or business, like if you got burnt like one time, it's just like, yeah, that sucks. But I mean like learn from it and move on. Yeah.
What is the role of close? I'm just trying to think, because it's clear to me that you have like a very close support network, incredibly close. And that's something that I've noticed amongst other conversations that you've had. It's like, it's all about the crew. Is that what you say? Good crew.
Yeah, good
crew. Good crew attracts good crew.
Is that not a Melbourne thing?
Yeah, it is. But I've heard you say it over and over again.
Yeah.
What is the importance in all of that, I guess, in what you're doing and what potentially others are even who are listening are going through?
Yeah, it's like I think a lot of people talk about like having a good support network, and I'm conscious this. I know I talk about it a lot about having a good crew and a good support. Like I'm very fortunate. I'm very privileged that I've got like the best friends in the world. I do know that. I say that openly because like I'm very fortunate, and like it is incredible. Like I feel like I can talk to them. I can call them. They can call me. Everyone's doing different things. Like whether it's in business and sport and fashion, whatever it is. Like everyone's doing some cool things, but it's like anyone can call each other and it's sweet. It's play on. However, I am conscious of people because I've had conversations with them who they don't have like similar support networks. Like I remember I did a shoot we shot for Movember about like community and suicide prevention and amongst a few other things, and it was a really beautiful clip. And one of the guys that was involved, he was sitting around like the coffee shop because they're like the theme or the skit, not even skit, but we were just like having coffee and we were filming it as well. Like, and we went for a surf afterwards. But he's like, man, that was so cool this morning. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, we just had coffee with our mates. Like, it's normal. It's just like, so I don't do that. I was like, what do you mean? He's just like, that's not a normal thing for me just to like go out and like have coffee with my mates. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, something that I do like weekly, like something that I don't even think twice about. And what we came to realize is that like not everyone has like these amazing support networks. Like not everyone feels like they can just like call up anyone on a dime and have those like long lasting like that's special. And I feel like there would be a whole host of people who don't have that. And then when I constantly think, well, like part of me feels like a bit of a fraud for talking about it because like I can't relate. But then there's another part of me that thinks just like, well, what's actually gonna help? Like how do we get there? Like what have we done to get to the place where we do have a really great support network, a really good crew, and a really great friendship? And I think it's just like finding people who are like aligned with your values. Like everyone who's aligned with me and my values, like it's all like similar things. It's like physical activity, and it's like family, and it's like friends, and it's like being a good person. But then it's like that might be different. Like it might be like your thing might be whatever. It might be like math, or it might be like video games, or it might be like swimming or running or like rock climbing or like these like road things. Like, but like find things that like resonate with you and that you like doing. Because when you've got like a common bond or like a common like theme or something to like bond over, then that's when you're going to create things. And that's obviously over a time. Like you're not going to meet someone and then just be like, oh my God, they're going to be my best friend forever. And like, you'll have like a 10-year relationship. Like it takes time and it takes investment. Like I invest in relationships that I really care about. Like I said, I had about 3 or 4 friends who I can call on a dime and I will do anything for, but I've also invested in them heavily, like in terms of like time, majority, but then like other things, like how can I help them? Like, what's actually going to help, like, how can I help them in terms of like speaking or whatever it is? But I've invested in those relationships and they're my core, but then there's also like probably like a layer underneath there where it's a whole host of people. Again, like just comes down to being a good person, but it's just like invest in that and not just think like you're trying to get something out of a friendship. It's just like, how can we actually help somebody else? Because like that's usually respondent. So I do sympathize for people who don't have that, because it's tough. It's tricky. I couldn't imagine a life without friends. That would be a very tough life. But you can, like, just knowing that you can actually change it. Well, I think you can actually change it and you can actually move that needle is super important.
Have you noticed in what you're doing more people opening up to you?
Yeah.
In private as well?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Naturally. I think when you're in the mental health space, naturally people talk to you, like DMs and you can't get to them all. Really? Like, yeah, for sure. Like that's just a part of it, especially when you release a clip that really resonates with someone, because usually like that resonates with a whole host of other people and it just blows up. Yeah. But even with like friends and family, mutual friends, or even when you're like out, like the photographer today, like great example for someone who's opening up. And like, I think in person it's awesome because like you can be like, you're that person for them. I think that's important. It's a really cool thing. Social media is tricky because you can't get back to everyone, just given the time point of view. That's why, but that's also like you give as much as you can through like social media and clips and the podcast, right? But yeah, in terms of like people opening up like in person, yeah, all the time. Especially when I wasn't, like, I just did a year of not drinking, right? Like I took a year off. And the biggest ones was where like when we were having a night out on the piers, because everyone's drinking, right? Everyone's like, and that's usually like you have a couple of drinks, like their barriers are down, they're more likely to have a conversation, and you're like the mental health guy. Not that I want to be the mental health guy, it's just naturally happening like that way because I care about my mates. But it was just like they're happy to have these conversations with you because you know you've had them before, right? Like, and so they might have listened to things that you've said that resonate with them. But it's cool because like usually when you're on a night out drinking, people are usually like, oh, you just forget about it because everyone's like wasted or whatever. But he's like, I don't forget. I don't forget. So like I've had so many occasions where guys are like, they'll tell me things that they're really struggling with, whether that's like family, partner stuff, financial stuff. And then like I'm checking in like on the next day or the next couple of days, and like, oh, I don't remember. Like I can't remember you. I can't believe you remember that. And you're like, of course. Like that's I think a beauty of not completely writing yourself off when you're on a night out. Well, it's definitely one of the perks. Obviously, it's all about balance, but yeah.
I know your goal is to sort of break down the stigmas, and I'm just listening to you now. I see that as a stigma, being drunk and opening up and not being comfortable enough to do it.
Yeah.
Being drunk.
Yeah.
Without being drunk, sorry.
Yeah. And it's like I don't have a to be honest, like going sober was just like a challenge for me. I think I'll dip in and out of alcohol. I don't think I'm going to be one of those guys who it's like I'm not an extremist. Like I don't have to. Like I'm very happy to sit in the middle. Like I like having a wine, like having a beer. But the days of like completely writing myself, I think are over. But yeah, that's that stigma around like having to have a drink, having to have a drink to have fun. Like to be honest, and that was like part of the reason. Like my sister the other day, she's just like, it's her wedding coming up, and she's just like, oh, are you gonna drink? Are you gonna drink and have fun with me on my wedding? I was just like, I don't need alcohol to have fun. Like I've proven that over the last year. Like to be honest, like my first month of going sober last year, September last year, had like 3 weddings and 2 bucks parties. You know what I mean? Like sober, and I was like more than happy to settle into these. And so when I settled in, like I'm still leaving like 2-3 in the morning. Like there's still like long nights to have a little Red Bull just to try and stay awake. But it was like I learned that like if I did have alcohol, that wouldn't have elevated my happiness or elevated the experience at all. Like I had the most amazing time at the weddings. I had an incredible time. Like I was just in Bali recently. I got to marry like 2 of my best friends. Like it was an incredible wedding. They absolutely smashed it. And but I was so sick the day before. and I was like, I like had the flu. I was shivering the night before. I didn't even think I was going to be able to like marry. And just a preface, I'm not a celebrant at all. They just asked me to do it because we're in Bali. Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome.
So it was cool. So it was a fun thing. Yeah. And so like that day, like to be honest, I didn't have a lot to drink. Yeah. I had a few, but I was like so sick the night before. And to be honest, it was such a beautiful wedding. And like when I look back on that, I was like, that was so much fun. I was like, I feel like if I had alcohol, I don't know if that would have raised the happiness level for me. Yeah. And when everyone woke up the next day, we're all sitting around the pool, just like laughing about like, and all the best things was when like she walked down the aisle or when like the speeches happened. And like, and I was like, while it's fun, like that someone, you know, might have slipped over because they were too pissed. Like I'd much prefer like the other memories. You know what I mean?
For sure.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
Have you found you ever in a position, I guess, that potentially you're not in a good headspace and people are opening up to you?
I'm sure there would have been.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure there would have been. Yeah, there has been for sure. There was one recently, someone who's like super close to me, like this week, like you know what I mean, and someone who was super close to me, and they were like kind of like not having a go, but like they were just saying like, you know, you're so busy, so we don't get to see you that often, and it was almost just like you're supposed to be like this mental health guy, but you don't even know what's going on in your backyard. And I was just like, fuck, like sort of hit me by surprise a little bit. I was like, you know, like it's a fair call. Like I don't have a response to it. Like I want to be better. But it's hard because like, and it's probably not so suited to your question because like they weren't opening up. They were just sort of like letting me know. But to answer your question, I'm not really too sure. I'm sure there would have been.
What did it feel like to hear that?
It was yeah. It's a reality check. Yeah, it's definitely a reality check. Like everything you're doing now is to like help friends and family, right? And so when someone feels like they that's like not being met, it's just like, well, fuck, like what am I doing all this for? You know what I mean? Like, and so yeah, it's just I don't know. It's definitely been playing on my mind since then. It's definitely something that I'm thinking about where it's just like, I'm very comfortable taking criticism. Like I'm doing it for years. Like footy coaches, like let me know. Like I want to be better. And so it's a little bit like when you cop that, especially from someone you love, you're like, all right, well that hits a little bit deeper. How can I change that? Is that something that's worth changing? Is that a valid point, or is that just the way they're feeling? Because like you can't be responsible for the way other people feel. Like you can only be responsible for your own actions, right? And so you start thinking like, is this me? Is it them? So I'm in like this like in between phase of like trying to figure that out.
I had that happen to me the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened?
Someone called me pathetic.
Really?
Close friend. For doing what I'm doing.
Really?
Yeah.
What, with the podcast?
Just everything, just how much time I'm dedicating to it.
Really?
Yeah.
What, because they feel like they wanted to spend more time with you?
I was at a party and I cannot, if I don't want to be somewhere and it's like 10 p.m. and everyone's drunk, I can't fake it. And I'm incredibly tired. I got up at 4 that day. Sure. So I probably was there, but I wasn't, you know, like I was trying my best. I really was, but I was like incredibly tired. Yeah. And yeah, I think he could tell that I was tired and he just came up and yeah, he said it right in my face.
Do you reckon alcohol played a bit of a contributor to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he'll even listen to this, so I don't even care saying it. But yeah, he sent me a message afterwards and he sent me a voice message as well. Yeah. Calling me pathetic. Yeah. And he said, he sent me a text the next day or 2 days ago and he goes, yeah, this is hard for me as well. But he said, yeah, he basically said on the message that he couldn't remember what was said. I didn't respond, and I said, if he follows up again, I'll just say you sent me a voice message. Yeah, yeah. Go up and listen to it. Yeah, but it hit me. It's
interesting that because like when I hear that, my mind automatically thinks, well, that's a reflection on him, not a reflection of you.
For sure.
Do you think that?
Or but you still,
of course,
you still second guess.
Yeah, yeah. It's do you feel like you could have a conversation with him?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Don't think I want to in the short term,
sure.
to be honest.
Time helps. Time's great.
Time helps everything.
Time helps everything, man.
Speaking of time, we've been going for an hour 35, man.
Fuck, it's far out, man. That's flying.
Been an unbelievable chat.
So cool, man.
Yeah. I really appreciate you coming down and obviously sitting with me. I did forewarn that I had a bit of an interesting ending. And I wouldn't actually say it's interesting. I'd say it's something that I thought I needed to do, honestly. Listening to your story and people that you've spoken to, I mean, the common thread and with what you said about Regan is keeping him alive. So I thought this would be a good way to keep him alive. And when I was doing my research, I found a letter that Angela actually wrote. So I thought I'd read it out. It's quite long, actually, but I'm going to read it. One of the most common things people have said to me about my beautiful boy Regan was that he appeared to have it all. And in some ways he did. Handsome, naturally gifted both academically and athletically. He just attracted people to him and was a natural leader. He also took his own life. The one thing I've learned about suicide is it can happen to anyone. He fitted in well at school, loved the footy and being around the Cowboys. He debuted for the under-20s in 2014. He was thrilled that year. He captained the Queensland schoolboys team at the National Carnival in Darwin. Unfortunately, he injured his ankle, but after only being able to play 2 games for his beloved Queensland, was still chosen to represent his country in a tour of England and France. The ankle injury was worse than first thought, and he had to have surgery, ruling him out of the tour. He was devastated. To everyone else looking in, he had it all. He was a leader, good-looking, intelligent, and by all accounts had a bright future in rugby league. He had a charisma that drew people to him and therefore had many mates. But no one saw what the battle was he was fighting in his mind. On the 3rd of January 2015, you said it was Australia Day from memory. Is that Australia Day?
No.
On the 3rd of January, that's what the letter says, 2015, he made his first attempt to end that battle. Yeah. That was the first true indication that he was really struggling. Naturally, we sought help and he promised me he would keep seeing the doctor. He assured me the attempt was a stupid, spur-of-the-moment thing and he was fine. But he wasn't. By this stage, he was broken, quiet, and couldn't look anyone else in the eye. He was sort of in a pain that some but not all understand. On Australia Day in 2015, the battle Regan was fighting ended. He was just 18. If there's one thing I beg you to do, it's to simply listen to your children. And I mean really listen. Kids really can be really good at looking you in the eye and telling you what you want to hear. Regan was one of those. We all think this is something that happens to other people, but you need to know that this can affect anyone. Our children are so precious, and letting them know they can talk to us about anything is really important. We need to learn how to listen, really, really listen. Sometimes we are so busy trying to fix them that we miss what is actually being said. Nobody wants to see their child struggling, but knowing they have you as a soft place to fall is an important message you can give them. My story was and still is heartbreaking, but hopefully it can benefit someone else. If it saves just one person or family, then my message will have been worthwhile.
She's so incredible, hey? Fuck, she's so incredible. I just think about Regan that whole time, like the charismatic, like how like personable he was. He's such a good dude, bro. Like, and for like Ange to write that, like in the thick of it all, like she's so impressive, man. And she speaks so well of Regan, like man, she speaks so good of him. And she's gone on and she's spoken like after that. Mate, thanks for reading that out, man. I've heard her talk about that over the phone, but I've never heard that whole piece. It's so well written because it just embodies everything. Like it embodies like everything like that should be said. Like imagine losing like your son, and I just fucking couldn't imagine it, you know. It's just, like it's the even the bit where it's just like when she said like they can look you in the eye and tell you that it's gonna be fine. Like how heavy has your headspace to be like to be like that, and even to go in like in the evening to go in that direction. I don't know, I'm probably not making any sense right now, but it's just like I can imagine that when you're so far down like the track, how hard it would be to come out of it, but knowing that you can come out of it is the biggest thing. You can be down that path and pull yourself out of it, because it is such a permanent solution for a temporary problem, man. Like countless people have been in that exact position that you're in, and it's hard when you're in it and you don't think that you can go anywhere else, and like the doors are closing in, the walls are closing in, and you think like that, well, this is it. It'd be better if I'm not here. Like no one's going to miss me. No one's going to care about it. It'd be better if I wasn't here. But like the fact that it is just a stage, it's just a time of your life. Like, and you'll be so much better off for coming out of it. Like, and I think I have a hypothesis. I generally think that we see a lot more like younger suicide rates. Like suicide rates are higher in younger males, or even just in general, because like we haven't built up the experience to know that we can get through these hard things. Like imagine like going through that stage and then just catching yourself and then like being able to get through that little time. So the next time when you are in that stage, we're like, oh, well, I've got it through it once before. Like I'll be able to get through it again. And it's kind of like, it's like seeing that evidence, right? Like, but then when you're so young, you don't have that. And I'm just thinking out loud. When you don't have that evidence, you're like, well, this is the hardest thing. It's not going to get better. But then I hear that and it's like, it's so raw, bro. Like she's so incredible, man.
I can see now why you care so much about what you're doing.
Yeah. I'm just fucking sick of losing mates, man. Like, I just like, I just fucking like, I just love I love my mates so much. And even like when you see people who are like, when they're in the thick of it, like it's gonna hurt anyone, man. Like, and like sometimes you think like, oh, is this like making a difference? Like, is this even working? And then when you start hearing like these messages, or when people come up to you and you're like, oh, like thank you so much, like you've helped me so much. It's like, well, that's why you're doing it. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, fuck, like it's so prevalent in community. Like suicide is so prevalent in community, right? Especially in rural communities. Like, it's like, how do we actually genuinely move the needle? And obviously, like when things are like, when you're passionate about something, or when you've had a personal experience with something, you're way more likely to be involved with that, or you may well like you're more than likely to dive into that. Like that's why I do this, man. I want to have the tools to be able to help friends and family so they're not in this stage. Like it's an awful place to be. And then you look at the trends, like the family members afterwards, like Angela, right? Like their family. And that's like, there would be so many other families like that. Sucks. It's fucking terrible. It's awful. I hate it.
It's got goosebumps.
Yeah. And to be honest, man, I can't thank you enough, bro. I can't thank, like, for not only having me on, but like creating like a safe enough space, like for me to, I feel very comfortable here.
Thank you, man.
You're doing a really good job. When you reached out, obviously like looked up your stuff. Very careful, not careful, but like I don't just jump on anyone's podcast at the moment. And I love what you're doing in the mental. I said that at the start, and I genuinely mean it. I think you're doing an incredible job at talking about people's journeys, talking about people's experiences. And again, like while it's in a different format or different themes, like mental health is this whole spectrum.
Sure, man.
You know, it's like, and it's different themes, and you know, you're talking to these incredible people, and each theme's different, and each theme is going to resonate with different people. So that's why I think there's never going to be enough mental health advocates out there, especially for men. Like having good like male role models for like the young kids coming through, and I think the young kids are doing it better than our parents.
For sure.
I think those stigmas are definitely changing. But yeah, it's an evolving conversation, and I think I'm really impressed with what you're doing, bro. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, man. I think that's a good way to end it. Thank you very much for your time, and let's stay in touch.
Cheers, bro.
You're a good man.
Mate. So good, bro.
Good work.
That was epic.